Greetings to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. This is day 2 of our global virtual gathering, the second session from 1 until 3 p.m. here in Hawaii. And just a little bit of context, the group here, like real humans, we are encouraging an energetic dialogue, questions, issues, communion, ubuntification of shared space as a meditative priority of existence. And I would like to open this space up to the people present, the individuals, the men and women present, for their questions, their concerns, and interweave them in with other issues and questions that came up yesterday along with my own edges. So please, may I invite you to participate in the way that's appropriate for you, and let us carry on in the gift of this very rare and sacred space for me, and I hope you as well. I want to emphasize, not too heavily, the importance of keeping our Dhamma alive. You know that I use that word quite frequently in the simplest way. The immediate experience, as we do with oxygen and breathing, there's no ambiguity that I'm breathing, that I must do it on my own, and I must repeat it and repeat it well in order to animate my life, my senses and perception. The Dhamma is equally the necessity of immediacy, experiential, done by oneself and done repetitively to fulfill the necessities of freedom, of love, of kindness, animating the senses with beautiful states of mind, the Dhamma. So may I invite you to make what's going down today in your life your meditative, yogic, human practice of including real-time events for the betterment of your life and your family and your friends in your world. So we had a few questions and issues that came up. I'll just repeat them and then we'll open it up to the people here in the room. A lady brought up yesterday the concern of embodiment. I mean, I invite you to look at your hands. Embodiment. I mean, it's something like, why would we need to talk about embodiment? What does it point to? Hands, ears that hear, a nose, lips, tongue, taste. I've often imagined embracing one of my greatest fears, not being able to see. And how I could survive that. And obviously there are many, many people that do and do well. And for some grace of God, sight was returned and the eyes were opened. What does the word embodiment mean when we just simply play with the realm of the senses in terms of their innate functionality? And then playing in a meditative reflection with the absence of that innate functionality to instill a higher degree of fidelity and sacredness to the innateness. Not much needs to be done except a type of sonic, sensual, sensory prayer that's felt in the play of innateness. No meditation. Imagine how we take for granted. I don't use the word we. There are many who do not take for granted mobility. We in the monastery where I was recently in Burma before I left a year and a half ago, I walked around the temple many, many hours, and there was one hall that was dedicated to the handicapped. Those, for whatever reason, unable to move with their own volition, eat with their own volition, see because they were blind. And they were in this one large residence building with their own meditation hall. And I remember walking as a monk many times across the outside of this building, and you could see wires that were attached from one wall to the other, where the men and women whom were blind touched the wire, because it was a very crowded building. Lots of people came to the monastery to meditate, to stay in a unified line, doing walking meditation slowly, just holding on to the wire. Embodiment. Revering the form, revering the functionality of the senses, refining the acuity of the senses themselves, developing a more refined aesthetic with how we see, how we hear, how we listen, how we taste, how we smell. Those of you who do meditation know that it's the refinement of the perception through the senses. Deeper the Dhamma is the wisdom of knowing how to refine and clarify the clarity of the senses, the eye, the ear, the nose, the mind door, removing obscurations and enhancing luminosity. Embodiment, what does it mean? Embody the reality of being embodied in the realm of the senses, the study of perception, the acuity of clarity of what we see, hear, think, taste, touch, think, dream, and how we interpret it, the freedom to think. How well among those who are discerning know family members, friends, lovers, husbands, children, whomever, who have cognitive struggle. I've said it so many times, I'll not stop talking about my best friend, one of my best male friends who passed away with early onset Alzheimer's. Diagnosed in his mid-50s, a former monk, a DJ, a professor of English at Kyoto University, who lost the embodiment and the connectivity of cognition and biology with the neurology of the brain, and a plaque densification and deterioration of memory, short-term memory especially. However, he mindfully inhabited what we call the wisdom or the Dharma of Alzheimer's. Although his cognitive functions on a cultural, societal level seemed to be in great collapse, and he died of Alzheimer's or something connected to the decline, his Dhamma became more radiant. What does embodiment mean? Although we're aging and diseased and dealing with handicap, Do we empower the radiance of our Dhamma over the culturally sanctioned phenomena of hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, walking, talking, moving, reclining? Political prisoners I've studied and been intimate with over the many decades. Those of you who know, I've spent a lot of time in the country of Myanmar, interviewing, talking, communing carefully with former political prisoners. How do you keep your Dhamma alive? How do you embody Dhamma in the confinement of a prison cell under very extreme conditions, often of sleep deprivation, medical deprivation, harsh and unremitting verbal, psychological tortures, and often physical tortures? The pure confinement of people whom are put into small cells meant for only 3, where there's 7, where they have to rotate hourly rotations in order to stand or to sleep, where there's 1 bucket for a group of 5 to 7 men and or women to answer the call of nature in that confinement. What does it mean to be embodied in our Dhamma under those kind of conditions? My mother died at 96. She was easily confined to a wheelchair. That's a conventional label. She was delivered at that stage of her life being unable to walk with the assistance of a wheelchair. She inhabited wheelchairdom, if you will, with incredible poise and grace and sensitivity. My mom was not a complainer. But she told me before she died, when I was with her, Alan, you're relatively young compared to me. This is just a few years back, about embodiment. Paraphrasing my mother, I can't do anything without the assistance of others. I'm still embodied, okay? How do you embody wisdom and grace and love and kindness and patience and transformational wisdom when you're 96 in a wheelchair and everything that you do, bathing, defecating, urinating, feeding, is being done for you, with you, in participation in a dance, a poetry, an angular, jagged relationship? It's not easy. I watched what happened. My beloved brother and his wife took care of my mom. Point. You're relatively young, Alan. Use your hands while you still can move them. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis. You can walk, you can run, you can travel. Use your mobility. Everything that I do ends up in a bag. People empty it. The food is brought to my mouth. I'm lifted up, I'm laid down. Use your body and mind while you have it. Embodiment. Okay, not just actualize the reality of innateness, but embodiment here, as I'll close and get into some other things, it's a vehicle. Treat it as the most precious vehicle possible. Do all that we can to identify but not identify, engage it but not attach it, because we have to shed it. But meanwhile, there's a grace in that process. There's an aesthetic in that process. There's an embodiment in that process. What does it mean to be touched and allow yourself to touch? Embodiment. Embodiment with other bodies, with other minds, with other hearts. So, poetry, artistry, aesthetics, sensuality, all the ways in which we inhabit the senses, all I would say in terms of how I deal with it, is to go right back to the innateness of when I'm looking, really truly look. When I'm hearing, when I'm really listening carefully, truly listen. Sitting meditation, a wonderful opportunity to infuse the entirety of our physical presence with now time intelligent, creative awareness that feels nature. Wow. This embodiment of biology and blood and neurology and nutrients and cognitive ecosystem of psychology and conditions. And I'm inhabiting that wisely, inhabiting wisely. Embodied wisdom, inhabiting wisely. And so I'll close here with the embodiment riff. What does wisdom mean to you? What does it mean to wisely inhabit your senses? Make notations. Embody those notations, live them, evolve them, and what doesn't work, relax them, and be willing to take risks to expand beyond, to heighten the aesthetics of the senses. It was brought up today about the issue that we brought up yesterday, UFOs and deities. Children. How many of us have children? How many of us are children of parents? How many people have walked the land before us that are our family? Children are innate to the planet, as adults are. Human life, one species among millions of others. The children, the issue was brought up by the gentleman today. Where is their hope? That's a tall order question. Because in reality, we've had a young 16-year-old who's now 17 or 18, Greta Thunberg, declare to the world through the United Nations filter, September 19th, 2019, you fucking idiots, all you talk about is endless monetary economic growth, you zombie idiots. You are killing the future of life right at this very moment, paraphrasing the young woman. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. People are suffering. Large populations are living in poverty and denigration based upon colossal climate collapse. And all you MFers talk about are your stock options in Facebook, in Google, in your real estate, and how much it's going up, in your meditation, in your psychotherapy, in your shamanism, in your plant medicine, in your fucking low dosing. And guess what? Meanwhile, as David Suzuki, the great environmental philosopher, said from Vancouver decades ago, we are a global family of kids in a car running headlong into the brick wall of the sixth mass extinction. And all you can talk about is what's on the radio, or where you're sitting, or how well you're meditating, or what trauma you're overcoming, blah, blah, blah. The children are basically saying to all of us, we don't buy your bullshit. And guess what? They're trapped in the global, what's called homicidal economy. Where's their hope in that? Go to church, okay? Go to the synagogue. Go to your Buddhist temple. And even there, it would be hard-pressed to find tangible hope. What's realistic hope in the face of imminent, catastrophic, environmental, financial, societal collapse? That's the question the gentleman brought forth. I don't suppose that I have answers that are easy answers. All I can do is share where I have hope and where I communicate hope in my life and to my own child, my own daughter. Know the reality of the context that we live in. Don't turn away from the facts. Facts get resolved based upon the courage to look at realities face on. They're resolvable to an extent. There's been 5 great extinctions. There'll be 50 more. Trust in the sanctity of life post-death. Learn that rebirth isn't about reincarnation, it's about causality, non-centrality. Invest in conditions of beauty, goodness, trust, all the values and principles that you believe in. Put everything you've got into the energy of action to make your home, your body, your mind, your friendships as elegant and as beautiful and as truthful to the principles and values of your own life. And trust. That's not all you can do, but take care of yourself first. Take care of your family and your friends and your parents and your allies alongside of yourself first. I quote my friend Aung San Suu Kyi, our revolution of the spirit will be successful if each of us will empower one person at a time. What's the mantra? The courage to care about things larger than your own self-interest. Hope is found in the action of hope in action, not in the attachment to an outcome that we think that we need. Life is beyond us, and it's immediately present if we deliver the food to sustain ourselves, and let me put it this way. I'll close with a little story about hope. Most of us have known, some of us don't know the story of Yankel. In short, a very brilliant story that I read about. Yankel was a Polish young man who lived in Poland, and among many Poles at the time who were Jews were carted off in a train to a death camp. He recalls this story as a young man. He was put into a train cart, removed of clothing in the late evening, and there they were, 60, 90 men. They all knew that their future was a gas chamber. It's unthinkable. It's not even right for me to recall the story except out of a sense where there is hopelessness, there can be found hope. He is situated next to a man that he remembered from his village who was old, naked, shivering in the winter night as the train went to the death camp. He instinctually reached out to the man in front of him with his hands, freezing and shivering, it said, and began to rub the man's body with his hands to attempt to keep him warm. Pretty amazing compassion. And he rubbed and rubbed harder and harder to keep his own body warm and the man's body warm. The morning, at dawn, almost at the death camp, the rays of light, can we see them going into the train? The young man who had been rubbing the old man's body throughout the night to stay alive looks around, and of course you know exactly what I'm going to say. He looks around, and what does he see? Everyone in the train is dead, except him and the old man. One person at a time. We're in the great arc of life. We're a species spinning through eternity in an ecosystem of millions of other species on a temporal planet. 200 million years from now, no matter what we call hope and action, no matter how many civilizations come and go, our Mother Earth that feeds us from the heat, that keeps us warm and grows the trees and the plants, will engulf the very place that we all sit today on this planet. And there will be no more Earth. That's baked in. 200 million years is a nanosecond in time, in cosmological time. Paul Ehrlich, the great biologist from Stanford, who wrote the book, The Population Bomb, he was recently interviewed on a show that I listened to about the great extinction that we're in, that David Suzuki says we're going headlong into a brick wall of self-annihilation where everyone has their foot pedal on the denial of fossil fuel consumption. And Mr. Ehrlich said, from a biological point of view, from a cosmological point of view, the extinction moment that we're in, and be clear about it, we are going to extinct, is instantaneous. From a human perspective, it looks slow motion. Where is there hope? Quantum physics, Einstein's theory of relativity could be infused right into the center of the definition of hope. Where do you want to play the hope game? Hoping that New York survives and we can shop at, Saks Fifth Avenue, going to a restaurant post-pandemic. I want to fall in love. All of it, relative degrees of hope. But where do you really want to place your hope? And so this question becomes very, very important to me in talking to my own daughter about where I find hope. I don't expect to live long. I don't expect to live, beyond the extinction. I don't expect to think that our Earth is going to sustain. Michio Kaku talks about right now, extinction on Earth is one thing. There's millions and billions of other simultaneous extinctions going on right now, along with the one that we're in the universe, and that's just the foreseeable universe. 1 billion trillion other Earth-like spheres in our knowable galaxy. Which extinction do you want to talk about? Where do you want to find hope? The littlest of things I learned from prisoners of conscience, my friend U Win Tin, 21 years in a solitary confined cell in Burma, without a pillow, without a pot, without a mattress, without a blanket, had his teeth kicked in, no dentures. Sir, how did you find hope? My freedom was never theirs to take. Your dignity is not someone's to take unless you give it. Infuse hope with your sense of conscience that your life is right, despite any outcome that you hope or fear. Live in the immediacy of a dignified conscience and you will survive anything, no matter what. And he refused even to be released from prison on conditions that he signs things to not participate in politics. That's dynamic, radical conscience, hope, freedom, and action. Right in the center of your being is hope, right, young daughter? Know yourself sufficiently. Know your own mind. Know your own conscience. Evolve it. Dedicate your life to the dignity of the rightness of your thought, speech, and action. 21 years behind those bars. He came out. How did he keep hope alive? He refused to take off his prison uniform. Why? The courage to care about things larger than your own self-interest. Tremendous hope in that. I wanted to show solidarity to the other prisoners of conscience not yet released. When I interviewed him for the 5 times in our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom, co-authored with my friend and colleague Fergus Harlow, he gave away all of his book contracts. He gave away all of his proceeds. He gave away all of his real estate. Who did he give it to? To the families of prisoners of conscience who had no money and could not work. Where did I interview him? In a small, open air, little cottage in the dense, deep urban center of Yangon. Was he happy? He lived with incredible tenacity. I don't know what was called happiness, but he had conscience like I had never seen. And if there's hope in my life, it's right back into my soul in terms of how well do I engage my conscience, walk my talk, and care for the freedom of my own life as equal, if not even more important is the freedom of others. That commingling, that radical, activist, revolutionary, intersubjective action, that Ubuntu, caring for freedom, that's what we want on this planet, the caretakers of the universality of an ecosystem of sustainability, a love of non-humans and nature, calling off violence. Participate in the overcoming of desecration, genocide, war, xenophobia, apartheid, and be someone in that long parade of life. I don't know my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. I am who I am because of them. The family goes deep and long. How many billions of other humans? Where did we come from before then? Where are we going? The long parade of life. What are the values that I cherish the most? Let us invest in those values, right? Let our lives be dedicated to hope and action. How well do I keep freedom alive? The sanctity of mutuality alive. The quality of empathy and compassion and generosity alive. Every book I've ever written, every tape that I've ever taped, every live stream ever dedicated, no one's going to remember your name years from now. Set aside an extinction or two. But what they will remember if the remains in the sediment belt are discovered are states of consciousness. My belief is that consciousness will exceed form, and the formations within consciousness are discernible. They're invisible, but freedom is a known state of consciousness. Compassion is an emotion. It can be known. Invest in these states. Keep the great art of conscious awakening alive, and therein lies the humility of little steps forward. And the last point here is a very rare concept for me. Compassion in front of you is one form of compassion. It's very easy to associate with the suffering in someone in front of you. Very difficult to associate with the suffering of someone not in front of you. But how often do we reflect upon life unborn? That's my point. Hope found in nurturing sacred conditions for the unborn. Life is a civilization with inversions and convolutions, and I do believe that we're going to fight the Dostoevskian battle that God and the devil are fighting there. It's in the human heart. Take up the good fight. Take up the good fight and keep the future of life in front of you. And I think hope for the best in that little, very complicated interior, exterior land. You know, at the end of the day, even if we lose, we did our best. Yankel gives us hope, and not to forget the few people near you, whether it's family, father, mother, brother, sister, stranger. Keep your hands on life and keep the warmth active in one's own heart. So hope is so multi-layered. Ultimately, it comes down to existential rebellion. I refuse to participate in the innate evil of this cosmos, and I'm going to do everything humanly possible in my own mystical embodied life to eradicate my participation in violence. Small as it may be, insignificant as it be, an unnamed tomb on eternity, who knows? But we need to develop a world without violence, and I want to participate in that journey. So that to me would be an ultimate expression of hope, how to eradicate the genome within the collective of its proclivity to dominate, desecrate, and rape. Other question topics from you? Mademoiselle Tess, what is...
Alan, I have been working in Albuquerque going on third year in a war zone, working with urban Indian, Alaskan Indian, underserved community of New Mexico, HIV patient, transgender populations. A lot of them are homeless, living on streets. They're addicted to fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and cheap alcohol. They're dying. They're living on the streets. And there, as you know, their trauma is immense. A lot of clients used to live in reservation when I interviewed them.
Question
Question is,
people can't hear you.
How can I what is the best way to support them?
You know better than me. You're right there with them. I'm an outsider. What this woman is asking, let me just address the people online. She's asking a beautiful, profound, complicated question. She has devoted many years now to the people of her city who are addicted and struggling with alcohol, behaviors, pharmaceuticals, fentanyl, and the complications of those super toxic substances, often made by the very people who are rolling out these vaccines. No offense to you. What to do, how to take it higher?
What is the immediate way to support them to
I'll tell you a story.
Result?
It's, my daughter grew up in an area identical to what you're describing. It's called the downtown east side of Vancouver. The most, I don't want to use the word derelict, the most complicated 4 blocks in North America. All of the homeless in Canada, 98% of it lives within these 4 blocks because it's the warmest area of the country. And it's cordoned off with extreme prejudice, politics, and judgment. To the police, just shame and abuse them as victims, victim abusing ad nauseum. My daughter grew up on that very corner. More fentanyl deaths monthly there than there are COVID. I grew up there as a single dad, taking her, going out 3 times a week. You know the people. You see the needles dangling from arms. You hear the sirens. She asked, Dad, it's normal to me to have the bus shake the bedroom. It's normal for me to hear sirens in the middle of the night. It's normal for me to hear the F word, the C word, the B word. I just roll over and go to sleep. That context is so shrapnel. But more as you look into the eyes of the people and to see their lifestyles and to see the bashing of them as somehow they created it. Your trauma. What I would do? Okay, I'm the mayor of Vancouver. I've said this many times, Tess. I'm going to say it again. What I would do if I were there and I were the one on the street, what would I want? Give me a vacation in Bermuda with fentanyl. And let me take my girl, my boy, my basket, my IV, and give me some fentanyl that's free without the fear of police and hazards and cold weather, and put me down on a beach somewhere down in Cancun. Why don't we do that? Why don't we give them ideal conditions to inhabit a different reality on why they do what they do? Why not give them the splendor of a vacation in Hawaii? Why don't we dedicate the 4 seasons to the homeless of Canada and give them the best rooms in the world to help them and to learn from them? What the fuck are we doing to put them into the corner of our lives and to throw a few dollars at them and try to work it out with a few psychotherapists and gurus and shamans that it's historical trauma they're working out, called the genocidal occupation of the culture? Who the fucking wouldn't be a drug addict if there was a genocide, if I was an American Indian, or an Aboriginal? Everything I've ever known has been murdered, massacred. That's historical violence, historical genocide. So my response, I would turn Esalen, Hollyhock, Omega, all the great white elite privilege centers of transformation and vortexes of higher order knowledge and wisdom. I would turn the Buddhist monasteries on this island into places where exactly the boys and girls and the men and women who you're speaking of, that you're working with on the streets of Santa Fe, the rich, the philanthropists, the teachers, the gurus, the ones with the 6, 7, 8-figure book contracts, Tony Robbins, all of them across the board. Hey, throw some billions at the people who really need it. Not just the money. Give them another chance in a different environment. To live on the street like that in the dead of winter is like, what? I'm shivering like this. I want to go back home. But they're down there sleeping.
They die.
They don't die. A lot of them just keep going on.
There are people who die.
Yeah, of course they do. But what I'm saying here is like, it's a white problem. It's an elite problem. We're addressing it wrongly. It's a context shift. Give them 3 months at Hollyhock. Give them organic food. All the massage therapists on the island, give them massages. Give them all the clean needles that they need. Give them all the drugs that they need. Hold space for them. Do it freely, openly. Let them swim. Let them take hot tubs. Let them learn to meditate when they want. Let them fight within the sanctity of the sacred temple. But get them fucking off the streets and stop thinking it's their problem. I mean, to me, it's a very simple solution. Change context. I don't know why people aren't doing that. All these philanthropists talk about, the wisdom of big bucks and the investments of all these things, the billionaire's castle of consortiums of working it out and throwing money down if you do hoop after hoop after hoop. The people that really need to be supported are the have-nots. Go to a refugee camp, Mr. Biden, and hang there and see what an American bomb does to boys and girls. And you think you're a president who lives in the, the white class White House? We need to get down and intimate with people and elevate. I'm right into the Jesus camp. Our salvation is with the poor, the impoverished, the diseased, those who society just crucifies over and over again. Put them in rehab. You're a frontline worker, but it's a simple solution. Let me be the president. You would have voted for me over Trump, right?
Yes.
Wouldn't you?
For sure, yeah.
You would have voted for me over Biden, right?
Of course.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. It's a leadership problem. It's a leadership. We lack leadership in the fucking world. Sorry to say it. It's pathetic. They're just boring morons. I went to University of Virginia where you believed in being a president. Thomas Jefferson started the damn school. We were believing that you could be in the White House. I believed that. Turn it on to acid, even what? But after a couple of years there, I said, this is bullshit, man. In order for me to get to Washington, I've got to basically be indoctrinated. How are you going to stop the momentum of the war machine, the capitalistic crunch? So I bailed out like a lot of people in that time and said the only way is to go east, to ask the questions, and to possibly trans-psychedelicize my consciousness through the organic process of meditation. I wouldn't do it differently, but it doesn't mean that I cannot condemn leadership to be idiots that they are. So my response to you and the people like that is all kinds of little things that one can do, but it's like, what would I want done? Listen, I've been somewhat homeless, and people have bequeathed upon me residences. And believe me, when you choose not to make an income out of value systems, to walk a walk that's important for you to explore, you know who gives and those who don't. And you cannot live in the narrative of judging those who don't or exalting those who do alone. You've got to be very, very modest. And I think around the homelessness issue, if I were homeless and I was a drug addict, I want to be cared for. Wow, don't just give me a couple of bucks and let me go to sleep on the street. Would you take me into your home? But you'll steal everything. You'll probably rape my daughter, won't you? You go deeper down into that. So I think it's very simple. It's not just a question of community hotels like they do in Vancouver. I say take them to paradise and reorient what's considered the privilege of our lives, these sacred environments. Look at the way in which we live, how we go about our own enlightenment. I mean, look at the nutrient and the food and the narratives on this island alone. So I would say normalize those people who are disenfranchised and learn to do what we did, at least what I saw in Burma. I'll close with the rant here, is that, one of the practices they did to be a revolutionary in Burma, here we are on July 4th, is they practiced the art of taking others in as family. If you stood in solidarity, even groups of 5 or more, you were imprisoned and tortured. They're shooting them now and raping them in Burma, right now. Back in the day, you do that, you're going to prison. So we're going to send a message. And if you don't like it, we're going to take your home, we're going to take your money, and we're going to rape your daughter. That's dictatorship in its worst forms. The most violent forms of what Xi Jinping did in China, you committed genocide. My point here is Aung San Suu Kyi and her colleagues said, okay, guys, you have a home, Karen, you take in these families. And they did it, Tess, with delight, not as if you were now in my home and you must obey by my rules. Aung San Suu Kyi's cousin, U Win, who went to prison along with U Win-taen for facilitating my communications with Aung San Suu Kyi, had up to 20 other families in his home meant for one family, because they believed in freedom and democracy, and they shared their money without ever thinking they needed to be paid back. They made food. They learned how to reverentially commune. We're all going to die. Where's your loot going to go? What's your legacy going to be? We're in the dying, breathing moments of an extinction, and we're talking about where we should sit in the car before it crashes. What's on the radio? How well do I occupy my psychotherapeutic presence? No offense. I'm right there. But this gentleman brings up hope. You bring up a very powerful concern that's deeply passionate to me because of my daughter and also what I've seen in the world. I say redistribute. How do you, this is another thing. Well, you read my book, Extinction X-Rated. How do you fucking, how do you get a calcified mind, indoctrinated, no judgment, indoctrinated by privilege, profit, and the power to desecrate in order to preserve profit and privilege? You don't just have power and privilege as a nonviolent activist. You got to work at it. You got to pay it. You got to learn how to keep boys and girls killing for you. Welcome to America, right? To state the obvious. Read Chomsky's work, Howard Zinn's work. It's stated. We got to break lockstep with that. Really break lockstep with that. And what are the mechanisms in society today to try to obliterate, is a strong word, the deep paralysis of conscience within privilege? It's a cultural, societal issue. Like I've often in my book, you read it. I mean, how, Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden, the collective, how do we get you to become a Gandhi? If we can't think like that, who the fuck are we? What are we doing? Let's just keep worshiping Gandhi? Let's just keep worshiping Martin Luther King? No, we got to deal with the least among us. And you're dealing with it at the lower levels. But what about taking our plant medicine to the top? What about taking our Dharma to the top? That's been my riff. I say, Mr. Biden, let me be the existential psychonaut that comes to the White House and that administers high doses of psilocybin, and I'll hold space for you while you cathart and understand that your privilege is murder. Why is this so radical? Right? Common sense. Thank you, Tess. Namaste. Yeah. Common F-U-C-K inging sense. But it's seen as like, whoa, man, he's really rad. That's like, whoa, I'd rather have an extinction to hear this story. I mean, you're intense. You haven't worked through some old trauma. Maybe you should have some sex. you know. But hey, I say let's talk to leadership straight on. Enough protesting, enough flag waving, enough, neon signs of we want democracy. I mean, I say go straight to the head dude with digital and go straight on, Mr. Biden, straight on, Mr. Trump, straight on White House, straight on Senate, straight on Congressman, straight on EU. My teachers in Burma said, if you're going to get involved in Burma's struggle, this is what Dasu said to me and Utinu, Uchimong. Are you guys okay? Yeah. He said, if you're going to be involved in our revolution, you damn well better be in control of your mind. What does that mean? When you speak as if you are talking to the dictator in the room himself. Can you be accountable to do that? That taught me a lot, because what I want to say today with the world, I'm envisioning that I'm speaking to Mr. Biden. I'm speaking to Xi Jinping. I'm speaking to Ming Online in Burma. And I think that's part of our activism today. It's like take it to the very top. What do we want them to hear? Not that we want democracy. We want to hear what they don't see. And I think that's where we can be really, really incisive. Not many spiritual people, psychologically sophisticated people, meditators or yogis ever think they can be clear enough or articulate enough or even respected enough for what they say to be heard by those people. And the last point here is how to know the fears of the enemy. U Pandita would often talk to me about try to address their fears and their desires. So when you did interviews and TV interviews and you talk to them, try to inspire an awakening of conscience. And you do hard work. That's so amazingly compassionate, dedicated love and action. I'm more of a talker. I'm not so good at the front lines of service. I'm a little bit greedy and stingy, a little bit angry and judgmental. So you don't want to be around me for too long. Short term is acceptable, but not long term. But what I like doing is hey dude, I'm on digital connectivity with you in the White House. And guess what? I get to stage my shows sometimes, and it might even get on Netflix one day, and you might even download it with your fucking wife one day unknowingly. And guess what? Your name's going to come up because I wrote about it in my book, and I'm going to do a road show on that thing called Digital Virtual Fucking Theater. That's going to take a monologue for 120 minutes and try to obliterate your fucking stupidity, Mr. Biden. I think that's what we need to do in order to shift the paradigm. So to end the rant, the simplest of things, philanthropists, give to the people who need it in your own city or your own island. Yes, take care of your friends. You've got to take care of your friends. You've got to take care of the people who do good work. But at the same time, where does your heart get stirred? I'm shocked that the oligarchs of Silicon Valley, with so much money, knowing that what we're dealing with at the precipice of an extinction. What is extinction? The death of life at 95%. Small pockets of dystopian cannibalism. That's our near-term future. And we're sitting here in the temple of love thinking that it's all groovy. It ain't. It's already happening. Namaste. So this is my way of saying, it's documented, you brought it up. The wealth needs not crumble, but somehow be touched to want to activate their generosity. If they have the need to be applauded, so be it. That's not my deal. But how to feed, home, and allow someone, I think with my history with pharmaceuticals and addictive substances, it's the fear of intimacy, the fear of trust, not being able to wake up in the morning and trust that my life is safe. I don't know where the conditions came for that insecurity. And of course, the biological, neurological relationship between substances, I don't want to get into that. I guess what I'm pointing to here is you matter. You matter. That's what you do. You matter. You hold someone's face. You matter. Mm-hmm. You could have a breakthrough. You could have a breakthrough. And I've seen remarkably billionaire people who I have been with, multimillionaire people, in my day, back in the day when I would actually be around meditation and MDMA psychotherapy and off-the-grid kind of behaviors, it all comes back to not being loved. It's right back, looking at you. Look at you. I love you. And I think that's what's missing with the people who are struggling desperately. Context, intimacy, you matter, and the expression of love and the resources to allow them a different environment and a different behavioral patterning to go, God, I'm feeling like I'm somebody. I'm feeling better in the absence of fentanyl. I mean, the noise that we have to deal with without the substance filter to numb it is deafening to me. There's not a day that goes by that I could not go right back onto pharmaceutical drugs. I'll tell you, just be very frank with you. You know, I tried my hardest after this diagnosis to get mitigating substances to both mitigate the pain and take my life if I needed it. Not easy to get. And I tried, and I'm very clever. And I mean, I was dealing with multiplicity of top surgeons and great doctors, and I can talk. And I'm watching my mind tests, really, really clever, wanting to get drugs again. And I'm thinking like, God, Alan, if there's ever a time in your life that you can get drugs, guess what? You can get them now. You can get modafinil, you can get fentanyl patches, you can get Valium, you can get clonazepam, you can get Ambien, you can get, you might even be able to get some ecstasy, you might even be able to get some Quaaludes, you might even be able to get some morphine, and you may even be able to get some, all kinds of things. And so I'm going, Alan, you stop those. You threw them away. They're toxic for you. You don't need them. Okay, point one. Point two. But guess what, Alan? You're not sleeping at night. You're not going to be functional. And you talk about being kept up at night. For me, once this thing was diagnosed, it was really fucking hard to sleep again. Because every sensation in your chest is like, it's going to die. It's like I'm already a sensitive sleeper, you know, where I go in and out. Got to be perfectly black. I've got to put my hands on my chest to meditate, in-breath, out-breath. And it's a process. I don't know about you. It's a really difficult, challenging, intimate process. To be alive today, knowing what you know, and being in this age and encased in the biology of all the things that come down. If I have one little argument or stress, it's like... It's an electric current. So I'm thinking, you probably need something to chill a little bit. So I'm down to MadMed to get some CDB. And I got a really high quality creative joint. And I'm now in the office with my doctor talking about, how are you, Alan? I says, Peter, I think I could use something to help sleep. What about, you know, just some of the more natural stuff, melatonin or something? I said, you know, it's a little bit challenging. I've been taking melatonin, but, you know, as you know, not an easy thing to integrate. And now my point is I'm showing some interest in wanting drugs. Anyway, the long story short, he gave me an ample supply. Okay.
I'm glad.
Now, the goddamn things are in my closet while I'm sleeping. And I am right down with, I've already had my small glass of rosé, my small glass of red, and my small glass of port, which I do mindfully every night, along with my now 2 CDB gummies and my 6 milligrams of melatonin. And I'm chilled, but not chilled enough. So it's like 1 o'clock. I'm not going to turn on my phone and check this and that. So I go into the closet and there it is. I'm back. It's in my fingers. And Tess, I'm lying there meditating and I could feel it come on because I didn't eat much. I'm going like, fuck, my meditation has never been smoother. Love it. And I'm thinking immediately when I wake up, I'm like so on it. Finally, the relief of the pharmaceutical assistance to get me through, to heighten my radiance, to be more dharmically alive now that I'm awake. I go to bed. 2 hours into my sleep, wide awake. Meditating, in-breath, out-breath, 20 minutes. God, this is acceptable, but the Ambien is far preferable. I go into the closet, Tess, so mindful you would never know. I could have been enlightened taking that Ambien. Substitute this with anything. Money, sex, travel, beauty, prowess, privilege, likes, swipes, views. Okay, cutting to the chase. The third night, I'm taking 2 rather than 1. The fourth day, I'm going like residual. I feel like broken glass in my body. This shit is really disgusting in my body. The fifth night, I took 2 again, not wanting to take them. And I had the thought, guess what? It's going to be hell getting off these fuckers. I took them again. Alan, you know that the more you take, the more pain you're going to have. Take them again. I reversed the whole psychology. So I took 3. I woke up in the morning. I felt like shit. I knew that that was my touchstone to stop. 1 week off of those things, and I realized I called them wakeful pills. They're not sleeping pills. It's toxic. But I had the good sense of knowing my feeling sensations and how susceptible I am to the pharmaceutical narratives of chill. But I would do them, but they're nothing remote, is my point, to the CDB or the meditation or to the diet or to a day well spent in love. Nothing satisfies me more than going to bed knowing that I lived in conscience and grace and respect. And that's all that I think any of us really want. Yes. You know, I don't, that's it. That's it. And so...
yeah. I mean, this is what I do at night. Like this.
Namaste.
Yeah, but then so I can go to sleep.
Namaste.
Thank you.
So, other topics before we go into the final period here today.
Did you touch upon the UFO question?
UFO. Yeah.
Of slow leaking that seems to be showing up, a slow reveal that they are present.
I'd be happy to dive into that again. Yesterday was a pretty interesting dive, so you can check out yesterday's if you didn't. But I was saying that I had the good fortune of one of my best friends and long-term colleagues, Leslie Kane, who's turns out to be one of the world's foremost investigative journalists about the UFO topic. She's the one in the New York Times. She wrote the book about it. She's been interviewed all over the place. So we talk a lot. Or we've talked frequently in the last few months. I've also read her book. I know from the inside what she knows, not nearly what she knows or her colleagues. And all I'm doing is repeating information on the one dimension, and then on a personal level, I'll share what I feel on a personal level, and I'll show the distinction. I think it's pretty genius at this point, based upon her and her colleagues' diligence to demand and investigate and provide opportunities for authorities and secretive organizations, whether it be the CIA or the KGB or the State Department, to reveal hidden records that they have been documenting the evidence of the unexplained aerial phenomenon for decades. Her persistence of that has now revealed that information to the point where our normally secretive military, Pentagon, State Department are being somewhat transparent, right? Quite amazing. One wonders, like, why are they being so transparent? Is it a ploy to increase, as President Obama said in his New York Times podcast, to increase defense spending because it's likely to be made from China or Russia? That they have these secretive technologies that defy the physics of what we know? You know? Or is it truly an unexplained aerial phenomenon that defies the physics and the explanation? Leslie, again, stating what she has said to me and what you can read in the media based upon her ongoing media presence and her best-selling book, which I'd recommend that you read, UFOs is the title, and it's got a subtitle, and just look for Leslie Kean, K-E-A-N. What she's done miraculously is interviewed some of the leading authorities in the world who have had so-called encounters with unexplainable aerial phenomenon, whether it be the head of aeronautics in Russia, whether it be the former President Jimmy Carter, whether it be the senator or governor, I'm not sure which it was, in Arizona, a general in the Chilean army, prominent people, where the cross-referencing was done, where it wasn't just a so-called sighting, multiple sightings, and equally to be included in the book, if I'm not incorrect, was it had to be documented on highly sensitive technological radar. So multiple intersecting eyes and intelligence on the phenomena that then no longer could be qualified as within the physics of anything that we know to the human mind. That book is utterly fascinating. And I'd recommend, as a basis of the discovery, to read that. And to certainly, if you don't want to read it or buy it, to read her interviews, watch her online. She's all over CNN, all over everywhere. And the New York Times. She's the one who's broke the story, she and her colleagues. Okay, that's point one. Where I fit into this is, I don't mean to be glib about it, but I'm a child of the 60s, which meant rad music, psychedelics, and deep philosophical concerns, both psychedelic-wise and meditative-wise. Anyone who's meditated to any degree of depth will know of unidentified cognitive phenomena, you know, aerial phenomena, UFOs within one's own consciousness, that I'm looking directly at you and you're looking at me, and you can see and I can see, because we're both in a very heightened, refined state of psychic, intuitive, intersubjective presence. Alan, do you see what I see? And I'm saying, namaste, do we see that? We're going like, fuck, do I ever see it? And you're going like, Alan, what the fuck is it? And I'm going like, hell if I know, let's talk to it. And it's talking back to you, and it's simultaneously talking through me as if I'm talking to you, but it's talking to you and talking to me. Do you control your mind, or is it controlling my mind? And you're going like, do you hear what I hear? You're going, two things up, I hear what I hear. It's an unidentified cognitive object in consciousness. Gone. Just like the UFO. Gone. We live in simultaneity, right? Those of you who doubt that, open up your mouth. If you're in doubt of the psychedelic, with the right context, come to a meditation retreat for 3 months, you're guaranteed to come out a believer that who you see yourself to be and the identities that you've subscribed to are not singular in their definition. You have many identities, many dimensions of access if only you refine the atmosphere of consciousness. Consciousness is the prism. I think there are lots of degrees of intelligence with materiality that we coexist with in our universe belt. Point 3. If you haven't studied or even read some of the books by the preeminent astrophysicist and quantum physicist and theorist, Professor Michio Kaku, K-A-K-U. You can't read his work enough because it's not possible to have the education and the philosophical finesse to translate the physics of shared space. He takes the UFO phenomena and allows you to tangibly understand the human's place in the cosmos, the multiplicity of intelligences and dimensions in the most coherent, down-to-laywoman's language about dimensionality, curvatures in the universe. How would a UFO get from wherever its home inhabitants was across gazillions of light years? What body could live that long? Well, maybe it's not a body. So he talks about all the, well, you know as well as I do, all the artificial intelligences that we have accessible to us today, primarily up in Northern California, or the advanced artificial intelligences. He goes deep into that. He talks about self-replicating robotic aeronautical robots that fly crafts that defy the physics, that self-replicate, that go long distances ad infinitum to eventually go to places in eternal distances. And so he can explain in the physics of our own world, in our own language lexicon, how it's possible, which really opens up the discovery for me of the UFO phenomenon as it being just some kind of, wow, isn't that amazing? He decouples it, like Leslie does quite brilliantly, from UFO being the meaning of an alien. It doesn't have to be an organic creature in these things at all. I wouldn't even go there. So the UFO acronym has no connection to the word alien. Those who are in the professional world of looking at UFOs, from what I know from Leslie and what I've read, decouple that completely. Heightened intelligence without centrality of location. It could be completely mind-oriented, navigated from a long distance. Look at telepathy. You know, we're close in proximity, but your mother and father, if you tuned in, you could probably tune into her and him. And maybe you do, I don't know. A lot of us do. Where does that come from? Where are they? So who's controlling the UFO? That's another question. So Leslie Kane's work, her colleagues' work, Michio Kaku's work. Can't say enough about Mr. Kaku. He wrote a book recently, I think, the God Molecule, not the God Molecule, something to do with God, but his previous one was The Future of Humankind. And he's a real advocate of extinctions are natural to nature. We need to not marginalize them as the end of life, which is very interesting to me. Takes the theology out of the conversation. And so he's talking about how can we as a species, and I know Derek Jensen, who's not a friend of mine, but a colleague of mine, I'm blessed to have him in my life. He's written endorsements to my books. He is I think, the preeminent eco-warrior today who isn't into eco-humanism, the priority of the human as the priority species. He's an advocate of non-humans and the preservation of the planet without urbanization. Cities are not sustainable to the planet. There have only been like 5% of discernible time, and in that 5% of discernible time, it's been the absolute collapse of civilization and the ecosystem. His new book called Bright Green Lies I haven't read it, but I've read a lot of interviews about it yet, and I've studied his work very deeply to write my last book. I think to study the UFO issue is to also inhabit Earth so we could actually learn possibly from other civilizations without desecrating any more of the nest that we already have. So that's a very important foundation for the UFO discovery. Point 4, if you're into the field of transformational, interdimensional, spiritual, psychological play. I don't like to use religion, but if you're into that cognitive field, and you experiment with meditation, yoga, diet, nutrient, communion, communication, language, energy, frequency, and the psychedelic metaphor, as well as the lowest doses. I'm an advocate not of low dose, micro low, barely threshold breaking doses. Enough so that you are in control of you, knowing that you are the item, not the substance. You are not the clothing you wear. You love it. But you know, hey, I'm the item. These hang up in the closet. The substance is not the vehicle here. If you're into that, and I bring it up, and I'll close here, is put it this way, one of the things that I love, that I want to do in these it's just hard to get out time in front of me. It's just hard to get out. The months in front of me, God willing, is to activate what I said earlier about my mystical adventurer. I've defined my life not as someone who's frightened by context. I went from living in a 30-foot trailer, growing up in a military community on the East Coast, and found myself at the foot of one of the greatest mindfulness meditation masters in modern times, as one of the only Westerners there, against all odds. And I've done a lot of remarkable things. I'm not that educated. I've had 8 Nobel laureates endorse my books. I've been able to sit with colleagues and friends that I've met who are warriors. I couldn't live for an inch in their dimension. And so this mystical adventurer, if you're looking for self-hope and to not get your spiritual life right, activate the rad in you that defies the gravity of cultural conformities, spiritual conformities, tribe expectations, and drop into, okay, super rad, what does she want to do as the adventurer? Put all that in context with micro doses in the right sacred context with the right setting, and explore the UFO phenomena within your own mind. And it's accessible. And there are meditative practices to help you stabilize in different dimensions, how to radiate, illuminate, elevate, states of mind. It's all a state of mind game. It's all already inbuilt. You know that. How can I enter the recipe of heightened awareness? Take the Buddhism out of it, take the meditation out of it. How do I engage the nutrients of awakening to illuminate phenomenology that I normally don't see, hear, feel, touch? It's a mystical explorer, right? We're in the school of that. And not many people will talk to us this way, I feel, or talk to ourselves that way. So a very important point here, internalize. Create a deep fidelity of your interiorization here. What speaks to your heart? Mystical adventure? Cool. The UFO phenomena, I want to take it out of the world of concepts. I want to meet one. Call it in. There's practices for that. So, deity interconnective communication. I'm really interested in that. It's one thing to look at a woman or a man or a friend or an ally, a savant. Sure, we all love instant flow, right? We all want to do this and make love in our minds, our bodies, and God, who knows. But deity, deva, trans-physical embodied, not disembodied, trans-physical embodied, physicality that's radiant with a kind of crystalline-like clarity of consciousness. You know how we put on glasses and we see better? Same thing with the mind, right? State something so obvious but so overlooked. And it's easy to live in the layering of where we identify. The UFO phenomena points to multidimensionality within the frequency of physicality. These are things that are visible on radar. I'm pointing to things that are invisible to radar. But I also want to include things that are visible to radar. Another point, it may not be all that fun. In my research with DMT and MEO, there's nefarious energies that coexist with us. It's like, oh my God, that fucking ghost is in my room. That dude or that girl or that thing wants a little bit of my soul. May you be happy. And it immediately evaporates. Whoa, deep cognitive, intersubjective transformation of context. You with me on that? So you got to be very careful about what you want. Because the next thing you know, you've taken a high dose of MDO, a high dose of MEO or DMT, and you go, you come out of it and you're not coming down. That's the downside of the MEO and the DMT. It's like you cannot shake the experience. That's why I never advocate it. Super low, contextual, acquaint, familiarize, evolve. But if you want to have contact, have an ally, a sister, a brother, or two in your little research team. Have the documentation of the evidence of your awakening near you, your iPhone, a camera on a tripod. You want to see yourself. You want to come out of the thing 10 hours later and see what you said. Because you're going to be talking to entities without a doubt. If you refine enough and if you meditate enough. And I've done this for 2 or 3 days at a time with certain friends. And I'm going to do it again soon. God willing. And why? You asked the question, why? Learning. What's wrong with a personal preference? You know? Isn't that art? You know? Why isn't that art? Why not respect your uniqueness? Drop that too. And maybe you'll do, Alan, maybe you'll do your modern day Magellan. You know, the great, I'll close here, the great philosopher, astronomer from 15th century Italy, Giorgino Bruno, attributed to having, it's quite a word, discovered infinity. He broke the mold of the box-shaped Vatican world at that time. The theology of the Vatican was that it's not infinite. That Earth and life here and we in the Vatican are the center of the universe. You say, no deal. It's like we're part of a galaxy of causal conditions and blah, 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 blah. And the Pope at the time saw it as blasphemy. And you know the story, those of you who don't, and it's quite fascinating. They jailed him, imprisoned him, tortured him, and it said for 6 or 7 years tried to forcibly make him recant the theory of infinity, which is quite an amazing event. And you can imagine, you know, how it is. What are the politics of forever wars? You know, dogma is an alive and lethal artifice of consciousness. And so I guess what I'm pointing to here is that the ethical, spiritual courage to not only believe, but to adventure. the courage to look at the universe and say, I am not the center of this world. Basically is saying yes to life elsewhere. I was in Bali doing some things, and I was looking at the night sky there, and you can see it like you can't hear often in Hawaii. And I was yelling out in my silence, I'm not alone. And I wanted to know the boys and girls, the things, the entities, the deities, the devas. I wanted to know all the configurations of my samsaric sangha. When I looked at you, you are the longest lasting sister I've ever known in this world. You and I'll be reborn with Maitreya, and we'll be fully enlightened in that sangha, and we'll be able to look in each other's psychic eyes and go, we've known each other 10 gazillion, ultimate limit, an infinite pastime to be who we are today. This is our last birth together. Thank you for the journey.
It's been lovely.
Thank you. We want to do, it's curiosity, right? So all I'm pointing here with the UFO, it's activating curiosity. It's all that's being done. And the children, give them curiosity. Take the totalitarian slave confinement off the story, orthodoxy, biblical, bullshit, even Buddhism. Stop. But that's the war of consciousness. So you're fighting the good fight to want to do your feminine-inspired Giorgino Bruno. As we all know, the story concludes with infinity stays. Bruno had his tongue cut off and died and was hung and burned at the stake. All for defying a box-shaped world. And so, go girl. Go guy. I think the UFO and what Leslie's done and her colleagues and Michio Kaku and all the boys and girls who've struggled so hard to bring the evidence of what's been kept secret and weaponized. And it's increasing, I think, for me at least, wonderment. But not wonderment just in like, hey, wow, but like activate, engage, and increase my own intensity of exploration. And I think that's what you're pointing to as well, right? And that open-ended, expansive, cognitive exploration is the thing that I don't want to rant it, but it's the thing that I feel that's so often missing with people who are so-called successful in their Dharma life. That's why I'm so down with the role of teaching and authority. They begin to calcify. I did it in my own life. But then how to become more virginal and then activate the adventurer. It said the Buddha was motivated by two motivations, one of compassion. That's straight up fact. I care for you as sister. I'm going to do all I can to serve you as beloved. I'm not going to ask you what you want or need. I'm going to deliver without you even knowing it. And I'm going to do it continually and creatively to the point where you're going to be so annoyed that you're rich, wealthy, and happy. When's the last time someone looked at us and did that? Why are there so many fucking transactional stories on just loving, right? The last point of the motivation was the Buddha was said to have been jettisoned throughout eternity based upon the mystical adventurer. He wanted to know context, and himself in context. Himself only a figure of speech. He wanted to know consciousness in context. And that, to me, is what's missing in the fucking classrooms. Go wild, girl. You want to throw paint on your canvas and call it truth? It doesn't have to look like a Waldorfian portrait. You go to a Waldorf school and you see all the same drawings. And there's no other branding except Jesus. And no one uses an iPhone except every kid when they go home. Blind orthodoxy. Yes, there's some good things, but the UFO is instilling and awakening the wonderment, the awe, the adventure, and again, coming right down to the core motivation of the Buddha as I understand it. Well, I'll close with Michio Kaku. He says, we must, really must, it is our duty to preserve existence, life. That's what life is. Life itself intrinsically is the action of hope. Otherwise, you belong to the cult of evil. Those who understand intrinsic nature know that it is a battle. Why it's happening this way, who has a clue? It wouldn't be my design, but it's pretty out there. And we're taking up the good fight. And part of that, I think, is the spirit is no matter what. I don't say adventure and conquer, but I say let's go forth, because the earth now is very temporary. The earth planes are temporary. They may be good to develop psychological, emotional, dhammic states of mind, paramis, but hey, we want to party, we want to dance, we want a place where the field isn't one where it's fraught with torture and malaria. Sorry, I don't want to transform dengue and COVID into something glorious. I've got it, okay? I've got the Dhamma down, but I want to dance in a creative place that's never been done before, where there isn't harm and violence and rape. That's the believing of the mind of the UFO. Do they have information that we don't about the sanctity of life? Or are they nefarious? Or are they here to conquer, possibly enslave us? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. So, take me with you in your spaceship, and I'll entertain you while you navigate.
He's a young man.
Anyway, I don't know what time it is, and I don't want to take...
It's not 3 yet. It's 2:40.
2:40, okay. Please, take your time.
I just want to mention something that really touched me just when you said the word nirvanification.
Oh, yeah.
And the way you said it, something just like really
Superb.
Yeah, and I felt like you were really talking to what you're talking to this transformation of the spiritual.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for saying that. You're the first person in my life who said that. And it's only been in my vocabulary about a week, I think. But
Talk more about
it works for me.
Yeah.
I was very shadowed and somewhat in the closet around the concept of nibbana in Buddhist circles. It's a taboo topic to talk about, because it's equivalent to a degree of enlightenment. But it's also used as the third noble truth of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, as a momentary experience. And momentary doesn't mean like a nanosecond. It could be meaning the near vicinity of an hour. So you nibbanify the hour. And to me, it's far more interesting than the pedantic role of the word mindfulness or of virtue. I want to play a little bit more in the aesthetics of freedom. Nibbana actually is a synonym for unconditional freedom, an indescribable freedom, described often by the absence of something, but not really described in terms of the fullness of something, but the absolute absence of fear, greed, and delusion at the time of the nibbana moment, or the nibbanification of shared space, the nibbanification of my own mind in context to myself. I'm in what I call the liberation of freedom. What do? You practice meditation? I practice the liberation. I'm already free. I'm in a beautifying, parami elevating nibbanification of the liberation of the limits of my freedom to a more expansive inclusivity. What does inclusivity mean? So nibbanification is like, what are you releasing? What are you including? But it points to the confluence of interiority with the senses and the objects of mind and body, with the feelings of externalization, and you're bringing the high fidelity lens of unconditional liberation to the forefront of your presence, to yourself, to your own sub-selves, and to the context of what you perceive through your senses, normally called other. It's the highest virtue I think we can bring, according to the Buddhist teaching, being nirvana or nibbana, the absolute absence of fear, the absolute absence of delusion, the absolute absence of greed in that vicinity. Now, nibbana, classically, you may know, I'm only repeating things that I've read, this is the Arhat model within classical Theravada literature, where nibbana, in its deeper sense, is the absolute removal from it's a hard to get out word, substratum. The infinite oceanic nature of inner and outer being, and the simultaneity of consciousness without inner and outer. There's no chance under any circumstance, young man, young woman, with arhatship as a realized true experience, as it said, will you ever have fear, restlessness, doubt, confusion, anger, greed, or delusion ever arise. Even if you're being tortured, you'll not have fear or anger. You know causality at such an intrinsic, deep, oceanic, without boundary level. That nibbana is a very high aspiration. I cherish it personally as an aspiration. But since I don't know it, and only know it in its relative sense, there's possibilities that we all play with in our direct meditations where it could or couldn't happen. We don't know. I know that I'm an adventurer wanting to continue. So nibbanification is a new forefront language that helps me navigate in a more aesthetic, artistic, respectfully energetic rhythm with my own life and mind and relationships. I've sort of overcome temporarily the meditative filter, the yogi filter, the mindfulness filter. They're all cool and groovy, but again, I find them to be a little bit prehistoric for where I'm hanging. I know I can be. So nibbanification is a new way of interrelating intimately with another that reminds me of the necessity and the beauty of unconditional, not the absence alone, but the nibbanification here is, what do I want to bring to you that's unconditional? That I want to give myself that gift. You know, and I've been meeting a few people who really, really defy the gravity of normal heightened spiritual identity. I have to say, I mean, I mentioned Bodhi B the other day. I've known him for decades, but we've never really had an opportunity to talk like this. And here I'm in the context of his, I would call it, I don't know what, the death shop in haiku? Is it called the death shop?
Yeah, that's
Okay, there you go. I picked up the evidence, seeing refrigerator. He opened it up, I thought I was going to see corpses in there. And coffins and bowls of ashes and all kinds of things. But I bring it up because, you know, it's not often that men really, really commune in sacred, really amazing places. But he was someone at my point in life with his expertise and sensitivities that related in a way I would call almost saintly, perhaps even saintly. And I would say that was reflective of nibbanification. You know, it's got to be sacred, otherwise it's not really nibbana. And it's even more than a dance. It's something there, you know it. Super high, intimate flow with playing, navigating. You know exactly the poetry of that space. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Before we end the day, is there anything that you may want to ask again, or we'll close with a little bit of a meditation for the day? I don't know what tomorrow brings, but tomorrow is the third day of a global virtual gathering. I invite you online to commune, continue to invite your friends. Tomorrow will be from 10 to 12 and from 1 to 3. I don't even want to use the word the final day, but the third day. The third day of this. That word has too many implications.
Infinity works better.
There you go, thank you. The third day in infinity. As we discover our place in this great cosmos. So I invite you to please come back tomorrow if you're interested. Invite your friends. And to close the day with a little bit of silence and meditation, just a couple of minutes, if you would. If you wish to stay tuned here for us in the room, any posture that feels right. And just for a few minutes to, sanctify, consecrate, elevate what we've done, what we're doing, who we are, and move boldly and intimately into the present and into the future. So please, let us take a posture, a comfortable seat, wherever it may be. Place our hands wherever they're most comfortable, palms down on our knees or cupped in our lap. Sit upright, close our eyes, gently close our eyes. And may I just invite for a minute, any way in which you and I feel that we're choosing to feel the nature of our own being, anoint and sanctify that process of self-intimacy, self-respect, self-feeling, sensations in the body, vibrations and energy in the mind, uncertainty, hope, vulnerability, heartfulness, whatever. Allowing the breath to breathe on its own, nothing to uphold, embodied, natural presence that feels, just feels. If you so choose to let the flow of sensations and phenomena just to arise and pass through this eternity, let them go. Feel the flow. We're all alive in the same dance. Letting the breath breathe on its own, neither wish to live nor fear dying. In breath, out breath. May we fill up our hearts and minds with self-respect, honoring the innate struggle, the beauty of our accomplishments, the tenderness of our presence, our vulnerabilities, our mistakes, our hopes. Include as an archetypal mother, embrace. An unmediated dignity, just simply being human. I am who I am, having done what I've done, feeling what I feel. I love you, I respect you, I embrace you, I want to know all of you. And from our own hearts, may we radiate in our own quiet, connected way as we wish to be happy, calm, at peace, satisfied, secure. May we extend this sonic emotional wave of goodwill and metta and loving kindness and caring to each of us in this room, to everyone who's been communing with us and who will commune, watching this video live or simply stored online. May all beings in this temporary community of heart and world Dharma, may all of us live in peace and safety, cherish the sacred. May we feel each other as family. May we extend this wave of inclusivity across the lands and the continents, the oceans. May it fill and encompass all life on this planet, everyone equally, every living form vulnerable to the conditions of existence. May all beings everywhere come to know their true nature, abide in peace and harmlessness. May all beings be free of despair and suffering and conditions of cruelty. And may we extend this deep feeling of inclusivity to all the unseen entities and deities and devas, all forms, all dimensions. May we take a moment here to include all life everywhere, seen and unseen, known and unknown, far and near, every form, every dimension. May all beings, may all of life know itself at its true essence, overcome our participation in fear and violence, and may all beings everywhere come to know freedom and everlasting peace. May we dedicate the virtues developed in our sharing here for the betterment of others and the unborn. And in your own way, please take this final minute of eternity and consecrate your life, your day, your everything in the way that's most appropriate to the prayer, to the hymn, to the sacred music and art and heart of your own conscience and soul. What do you want to say to yourself about who you are, what you feel, where you dream and choose to live? To close the day as we did yesterday, taking refuge in the Buddha as a word to speak to the qualities of awakened consciousness, awakening, taking refuge in Dhamma, a deep experiential study of the lawfulness of freedom and the overcoming of suffering, and the development of a far-reaching compassion. And Sangha, I cannot be who I am without you, nature and life, interrelated and embedded creatures. I want to make good on the promise of the reality of being in deep interrelatedness. Food, shelter, clothing, love, kindness, medicines, everything as the result of everything. I take refuge in this recognition of Sangha. Allow me to chant these 3 refuges once, and then I'll repeat them, and we can chant, if you so choose, a second time, and then traditionally a third time. So, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha. Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. I take refuge in Dhamma. Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. And for the second time, Dutiyampi. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. We'll just do it a third time without. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami. Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. And please, in your own way, if you so choose, share the merits of your day, of your life with all beings, among us and in the future in all dimensions, open-handed, pouring the water of our paramis, our virtues, for the betterment and the safety, the elevation of life, here and into the future. Share the merits for the well-being of all life. And so as we end today, from my heart to yours, thank you for being in this room, in my life, in my heart. And for those of you who've been around the world tuning in, thank you for your love, your kindness, your immeasurable grace. And hope to see you tomorrow, day 3 at 10 a.m. here in Hawaii, and again at 1 in the afternoon. Have a great night, have a great day. And from all of you, to me, to you, to me, to me, to you, thank you for being in my heart and my family. You've been a tremendous gift, and I dare say I love you.
Love you back. Blessings.
So, okay, thank you. And to Karen, we owe a great deal of gratitude for your tenacious, compassionate organization of this complicated process that only you know the details of. But thank you, thank you, thank you for your grace and goodness.
So you use 2 words that I love to put together, but you use them separately.
Go ahead, please take.